welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the basic pencil crayon techniques. We're only going to look at a few just to kind of provide some basics and some easy things to be considering when we are creating some illustrations. The first thing that I want to do is start off with what are typically the two most commonly used techniques. And when I kind of think back to my own high schooling experience, when we were asked to create a title page, there was one of two ways that people would typically use pencil crayons. Number one, okay, would be to go through and to press as lightly as possible, and everything would sort of have this same overall tone in the composition. And because everybody was pressing almost as lightly as they possibly could, right? And they would fill in areas in order to try and get this really even light tone. All right, you can control the intensity by the amount of pressure that we are applying, right? So we could create like a fairly light tone, right? We've got a medium tone. We could get something that's pretty intense too, right? And again, overlapping and going over top of these in different directions is going to allow you to create different amounts of value. Okay, so by pressing light, medium, and dark. Right, so typically everything was really, really flat. The second approach that people would often take would be to take their pencil crayon and press as hard as they possibly could to get these really intense, rich colors, and everything would have that same intensity. What I'm going to be encouraging you to do today is to find a balance in between these particular two forms of applying pencil crayon. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is combining these two. Right, and there's two different ways that we can do this. So the step one, I'm going to just take my pencil crayon here, and I'm going to layer, and I'm going to find the tone that I am looking for. I'm going to create two swatches of pencil crayon, going back and forth, trying to make sure that I get even coverage over top of the paper, right? So this happens by pressing fairly lightly and gradually building it up. Okay, so option number one is to use a white pencil crayon. So we get a medium value, but with the finish of pressing really, really hard. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to press hard with my white over top. I'm kind of doing like a blend of the two. I can use a little bit of a circular motion to try and get the colors to blend a little bit more evenly. And I have the intense, but I have a different overall tone. If you are fortunate to have one of these guys at home, this is called a colorless blender. Right? And Prismacolor makes these. There are other brands out there as well. Right? And it works exactly the same way. The difference, however, is though because the color this is colorless, I'm going to get the tone of what I put down, but I'm not going to get the tinting effect that the white provides, right? So I get a different color. So you notice that both of those were the same, but depending on what it is that I'm layering over top, I'm going to get a different color overall. Okay? So this is number one. You want to look at a process that we call burnishing, which is typically using a lighter color over top of a darker color in order to get a sense of finish to the work. So that's number one. Number two, right, is I want you to think about customizing the colors that you have, because typically your pencil crayon set is going to come with a limited number of colors, right? The sets usually come in 12s or 24s are the sort of the most common. But sometimes we need colors that aren't really part of that overall scheme. So if I wanted to make a green, for example, I can take a couple of colors that I have, and I can customize the green. So if I know that I have a lot of blues and a lot of yellows in my drawing, I'm going to actually use these two colors to mix my green instead of introducing perhaps the only other green that I have in my pencil crayon kit, which is this one here, right? Which doesn't actually really work very well with the other colors that are in the drawing. Right? So what we're going to do here is to layer these colors, one over top of each other. So I'm going to start by placing one of the colors down. I'm going to press lightly and then come back in with the second color, and I'm going to kind of go in an opposite direction. right? By sort of crisscrossing the direction of my marks, I'm going to get a much more even coverage, right? And I'm going to come back, pressing really, really lightly in order to make sure that I am slowly building the color. Because if I press too hard, I'm actually not going to be able to blend the colors together at all. Once I have my my color blended the way that I want it, I'm just going to put my original colors side by side here, right? Then this is where I'm going to go back to what we learned in this box here, which is that idea of burnishing. So again, I'm going to do half of this one with the colorless blender, and you're going to notice that there's very, very little change in the color quality, but the texture and the finish of that particular area is improved. And then if I take my white, right, I'm going to notice that it's going to be tinted a little bit, right? It's going to have that kind of white ghosting effect over top. Right? So we have now pressure in order to create different tones. We know that we can press softly and we can press really hard, and that we have two different tools here that can be used in order to burnish. And then when we start combining this idea of pressure with two colors and the burnishing, we can end up with a bunch of different types of effects, right? So mixing some basic flat colors is going to be really important for you as well. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to start thinking about blending the colors. I'm going to take my tracer here. I like sort of defining a spot where I'm going to be doing some of my test work. And we're going to create what is called a gradient. Right, so I'm going to use the same two colors as I did last time, but now what we're going to do is look at transitioning from one color to the next. So with this one, I'm going to start with my blue over on my left, and I'm going to press with fairly light weight, right? But as I come across the square, I'm reducing the pressure even more so that my pencil is very barely touching the paper. All right, and then I'm going to take my yellow and I'm going to start on the opposite side. I'm going to have sort of medium pressure, and as I come across, I'm going to start to reduce the pressure. And I'm going to keep going back and forth a couple of times until I have a smooth gradation or a change from one color to the next. Right, and likewise, we can, if you like the texture, you can leave that as is, but because you'll notice that I've been very careful with how I'm layering it. Right, I could even change directions a little bit, slightly here, in order to help kind of fill in some of that textured area, right, and of the paper, and to create that stronger sense of finish. Right, or I can come back in with my colorless blender, right, and I'm going to just sort of use that circular motion again. Right, and now, especially with the blender, you can start to see how that gradation really comes together. Right, so these are a few different little tricks that you might want to consider when using color. Right, be careful. Right, color is a tricky business because there are so many different ways that it can combine. My recommendation is always to work with a limited color palette. Right, so pick a couple of primaries and then use those with your white, your black, a couple of neutral colors, and your colorless blender. Right? Try and limit yourself to maybe 6 or 7 different colors maximum when you're creating your piece, so that it forces you to work with a more cohesive color palette. All right, good luck. If you have any questions, please make sure, as always, you let me know. Bye.